So the next presentation, as I say, is Does the MSS Actually Make a Difference? It's my pleasure to introduce Bradley Anstis, I hope I got that right, Director of Product Management at TrustWave. Bradley works with partners and customers all over the world to define the immediate roadmap and longer-term strategic direction of TrustWave's email and web security solutions. Bradley is also deeply involved in threat research that the TrustWave Spider Labs team perform in the areas of email and web. Bradley is a frequent presenter and commentator, has presented all over the world in leading security conferences, and is frequently in the press on the real-world security issues that customers are experiencing. Bradley, it's over to you.
Good morning. I hope the swag collection is going well. It's always one of the best things to give away, obviously, on your stand is a bag. Note for other vendors, because the bigger the bag, then the more swag you can shove in it, and you suddenly become one of the most popular stands at the conference, which is all good. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? Basically talk about, can you really make a difference with managed security services? Disclaimer, obviously, TrustWave is a managed security services vendor. That's why we're talking about, can you make a difference with managed security services? And of course, at the end of the presentation, the answer is going to be yes. Okay? So if that's all you're actually here for, then I think there's free ice cream outside, great stand to go to, but I'd love to have you stay. So we'll start off by looking at where we are today. What does average look like? And obviously we're all striving for more than average. A quick evolution of managed security services, where it's actually come from, because there's some really interesting analogies we can actually draw in other parts of the marketplace. I've also got some of the latest Australian threat data that's just been released by Spider Labs. Pretty interesting stats there. And then really sort of talking about, the theme of this conference is, don't go it alone, right? So can you really be the cyber pro your organizations need you to be all by yourself? And I think, that's a pretty interesting concept for the show. When you first saw it, you sort of thought, that's a bit of a strange theme, but then you start thinking about it, and there's actually quite a lot of interesting aspects you can actually draw out of that theme. And then finally, we'll discuss where MSS is going and perhaps how you can better use MSS and change the way you think about how you use managed security services inside your environment. Deal? And we're going to do all that in 30 minutes. But the good news is I can talk really, really fast. So if we start falling behind on time, I'll just start talking faster. Hopefully you'll keep up. Okay? That theory does not work in Asia, I've found out. Okay. Where they have enough trouble trying to, track my accent without, trying to understand what I say. So first of all, trying to work out where we are today. What does average look like? This, for the eagle-eyed among you, good eye chart for those down the back. This is actually a NIST security model. So it's a standard security model that we certainly use quite a lot when we're talking to customers about, what is your current mix? Where do you need to be getting to in terms of, technologies, the types of strategies, your investment strategies within your organization when it comes to IT security? So protect is where we've all come from, right? So most of the technology, the historical technology we're using, firewalls, desktop AV, email gateways, web gateways, everything else, it's all protect technology. Where we're building the moats that Mikko was talking about this morning. The other point he made was we've got to kind of give up building those moats, and we've got to start working out how we can start detecting and responding. And this model is telling you exactly the same thing. So as you're going through and renewing the technology choices you have inside your environments, maybe some of the vendors that you've been rusted onto for the last several years, think about, how do I get out of just protect and into detect and respond? Okay, that's what you have to do. And there's a saying in the industry, I've been in security for maybe not quite as long as Mikko, but pretty close actually, that it's not a matter of if you'll get breached, it's a matter of when you'll get breached. And of course, because I've been in the industry for so long, I sort of start taking some of these things a little bit flippantly, but for most organizations, that's actually true. So certainly, instead of putting everything into protect, you need to be diversifying your investments in detect and respond. Cisco have been doing some pretty interesting research. We have too many products and vendors. And Australia, this is, by the way, for those that haven't already worked out, I'm actually not from Australia. I'm actually from New Zealand. So I'd just like to extract myself from this massive problem that you have in Australia because it's all your fault. Basically, you have too many products and vendors you're working with. Now, New Zealand's obviously not in this list because we're perfect, as everybody knows. But in Australia, 10% of your organisations are using more than 50 individual products and vendors within their IT security portfolio. 50. Right? The next section down is 28% are using, forgotten the stat, 21 to 50. If these are all individual point products, all with their own consoles and dashboards, separate products you need to be logging in and out of, I hope you've got a really good swiveling chair that's able to swivel between all those dashboards. Because those are a lot of products and services. Are you really getting value out of every single one of those? So this is creating a lot of the problem that we're seeing. Too much noise. But how do you know what's noise and what's quality? Another good stat from Cisco. I don't work for Cisco, I promise. But these are just really interesting stats. Australia, you're actually doing quite a lot better here. 30% of alerts are not investigated. Which 30%? How do you determine which alerts you're investigating and which ones you're not? You point you back to Target. Okay? They were alerted. There were alerts coming out of what was going on. They were looking at the wrong alerts. It's noise. That's the hard thing about this. The interesting thing I see here is Russia's actually one of the ones that are actually doing quite successful. They're also 30%. Makes you wonder what's happening in Russia versus the other country that Miko picked on this morning, which is China. But we're not covering enough alerts because we are trying to do it ourselves and we're trying to do it manually with too many individual products and consoles to deal with. So he also made another. I actually really enjoyed Miko's keynote this morning. I thought it was really interesting. Caused you might not agree with everything he says. And this is one example of one thing I don't necessarily agree with. But it certainly caused you to stop and rethink how we sort of go about things. And that's what these conferences are all about, causing you to rethink and revalue and retest some of the commitments and strategies that you've actually taken. So Miko talked about, you don't need to have the very best security in the world. You don't have to have, the Fort Knox of security. You just need to have more security than kind of the person next to you. Because they'll go after the easy targets, the low-hanging fruit. Remember when he was saying that? So, good analogy. You don't need to swim faster than the shark. You just need to swim faster than the guy next to you. But what if there are 2 sharks? Or how many sharks are you going to allow for? So while I agree you don't need to build Fort Knox, it's very difficult to work out. You can't be the least secure, but then you can't be Fort Knox. So exactly how can you be in there somewhere? You've got to be thinking about this smartly. And don't go it alone is a great way of thinking about it. Do you get paid by the photo you take? Or you're going crazy. I didn't think I was that good looking. My mum thinks so, but my children assure me I'm not cool or good looking. So. This is the security maturity model. So we'll actually be referring to this several times in the next few minutes. So basically how it works, it's kind of like the evolution of security as well. Down the bottom is firewall, AV, IDS, IPS, email, web gateways, etc. And up the top, so protect technologies, detect, respond technologies. Okay? A different way of actually laying it out. We can definitely get you copies of all these for those that are frantically taking photos, apart from my good friend down here. Okay, so what's your current state in terms of this? So like the NIST model, think about where you are in this. Hopefully you're kind of up around here somewhere. The organisations that we mainly deal with at Optus, obviously we're a TrustWave and Optus company, so Optus certainly deal with larger organisations. They're certainly up around here in the maturity model, doing pretty well. But one of the biggest issues you have in the marketplace is how do we help the stragglers keep up? Stragglers are down here, right? Paying the price. As a market, we need to be working out how we can make it easier for them to keep up and get up to where they need to be. We need to work out how we can take these, enterprise class technologies that are very useful and get them down market and accessible to the organisations that are struggling to keep up. Does that make sense? And that actually is a really good way of summing up what a managed security services provider should be doing. And it's a great way to measure maybe some of the partners that you're working with. So where did MSS start from? Who remembers outsourcing? Okay, showing our age, right? So outsourcing was this, and I used to be on the receiving end of outsourcing. and working at a customer that had a big outsource contract with a company who shall remain nameless. Unless you buy me a drink later, and I'm happy to tell you who they are. Outsourcing contracts were bizarre, right? It kind of seemed to me as a technician, and that's what we used to be called, right? We used to be called technicians, right? Seemed to me like the outsourcing company had more lawyers than they had people that could actually do things for me. Because every time I requested something, they were back to the contract with the magnifying glass to work out whether they should be doing it or not, right? That is the wrong reaction. And every time I needed something slightly new or different done, it was back to, oh, that's outside the scope of the contract, so you're going to have to pay more. Well, what am I paying these multi-millions of dollars per year for in the first place? That was outsourcing. You think about applying the outsourcing thought or process to security. Imagine how awful that would be. So luckily it's evolved. Then we get into a SOC. And the first security operations centers were basically a bunch of screens. The more screens you had, the better. The bigger they were, you had all the big flashy ones on the walls, etc. Fantastic, all exciting. How much value you were actually getting out? You look at these sorts of environments now and you think about, they've got a screen per product. That's what the problem is. So if you look at a SOC and the fewer screens they've got, probably the better, the more automated and orchestrated they are, instead of having multiple screens. Right? I was up in our head office last week, and we've just built this flash new Fusion Center thing. But man, their monitors, I don't know how big they are. They're like 60-something inches. They're about that tall, and there's this big curved thing. Like you wouldn't know where to look. It's amazing. That was the biggest thing I took out of our brand new Security Operations Center, is how cool the monitors were. Maybe not quite the piece that they were expecting, but there you go. And then we got into themes. So instead of having all these point products with all these consoles to look at and all these reports to try and make head or tail of, let's at least get all that data into one place. Let's try and start doing some correlation of that data. This is a good step forward. So SIEMs and managed SIEMs, etc., started really adding some value to organizations. This helps you put up with the 50-plus vendors or individual products you might be using inside your environments. And then we're kind of in the middle of here somewhere, right? And unfortunately, I couldn't find a red one, but I thought this blue one actually spelled out really well. Security operations platforms. So if you look at the big banks, etc., those sorts of organizations, they have these really cool security operations platforms that basically everything integrates into. So think of the SIEM as like, this is monitoring only. This is going to tell you when you have a massive problem. It's not going to necessarily tell you what to do or how to do it. It's going to say, oh, here's an alert. You're pretty screwed over here. Good luck. Probably won't even say good luck, but anyway. And then you go off and try and work out how to fix it. These sorts of environments where we need to try and get to need to be, not only the monitoring, but also the response side. So not only detect, but also response. Okay, that theme's coming through many, many times. So this is where your orchestration and automation starts coming in. Right? The more you can automate inside your environments, the better. You think about, I've taken an email security example. So you've got a domain that is spewing out whatever, and you want to blacklist that domain. How long is it going to take you to log into your email security platform and add the domain to a blacklist? How long? 2 minutes? 3 minutes? If you know what you're doing, remember what your login was, right? But if that was orchestrated, then the security operations platform is saying, right, we need to blacklist domain across any external accessing environment. Let's blacklist it, automated, go. There's no way you're ever going to be able to compete with that. All right? It's going to be responding in seconds, not minutes. And that's where we need to get to. MSS started the same place. Told you I was going to use this several times. Firewalls, AVs, that's the first sort of stuff that we started doing. So I'm going to introduce one of the two terms that I really want you to take away from this session. Commodity MSS. So this is historically where we've come from. Right? We've been helping you do all the boring stuff. We've been helping you sort of take that off your plate so you can concentrate on the more interesting, newer technologies. The flashy, shiny silver bullets that, if you don't buy it, the world's about to stop spinning, apparently. Okay, so we do all the commodity stuff for you. Firewall, desktop AV, IPS, IDS, all the sort of boring stuff, the stuff that needs to be done. Commodity MSS. Bit of a vendor map. So this is the latest Gartner Magic Quadrant, just released several weeks ago. So pretty interesting. There's only 14 vendors on this list. How many managed security service providers do you think there are in the world? Just 14? Obviously, an answer below 14 means that you need to go and get a coffee. There's thousands. There's niche players. There's massive companies, a lot bigger than some, well, maybe not all there's some big companies on that list. There's companies that aren't on this list, but are very large organizations, much larger than the majority of the ones here. But the inclusion criteria for the Magic Quadrant is actually pretty severe. Right? Really, this is very good reading. Gartner defined the actual Magic Quadrant, and the other thing to look at is how they actually define the inclusion criteria in that Magic Quadrant. Okay? Now, since we paid for the session, quick advert. Elaine, hope you're paying attention. This is for you. Here's TrustWave, right here. Okay. We're pretty. I joke about it, but we are pretty proud. This is not where we started. We're the only vendor that's actually moving on the Magic Quadrant right now, and we're moving because of our innovation. And funnily enough, that's the other term we're going to learn. Okay, so what's table stakes to start today in terms of managed security services? The market's growing 11% year on year, which is great. 47.6 billion by 2023, globally. Okay, so it's a big marketplace. Seems everybody's doing MDR, Managed Detection and Response. Managed Detection and Response. Detection and response coming through again. So now the managed security providers are doing it for you, which is pretty interesting. But there's MDR and there's MDR, so be careful what you're looking at. Is all threat hunting equal? When you start seeing, automated threat hunting tools come out, maybe I've been in this industry a little too long, but I can't, for the life of me, equate an automated threat hunting tool with just the nous of someone that knows what they're doing. Someone who's had their boots in the game for a long time, and they just know the tricks. I know AI and ML is all very exciting technologies, and pretty much just about every vendor in the marketplace gets them completely confused and mixed up. But anyway, be careful what you're replacing with what. Commodity activity, absolutely, can be automated. The highly specialist stuff, that's where the human value still is incredibly important. SOAR is talk of the town. Who knows what SOAR stands for? SOAR. You have to speak up. Security, orchestration, automation, and response. Hooking all this stuff together. So those 50 products you've got, all talking together. What's that? Security operations platform. It's the beginnings of one. You may not have stamped it with that name yet, but that's what you're starting to evolve. And that's where we need to get to. Because the automation behind this is going to react a lot quicker than we can, and the orchestration behind this is going to make everything talk together. The more stuff that's talking together, the less work I have to do. That sounds good. Okay? Data needs to be tracked, and it's very important, but certainly, the whole big evolution of data today is definitely changed a lot to what it used to be. You used to have server huggers, then you had your data huggers, not sharing anything. Everything is shared today across the actual marketplace. And one of the big issues, good people are very hard to find and very hard or harder to keep. This is what I think is a really interesting analogy to what we're doing right now. Has anyone read this book, Business for Business? Okay, then I can tell you whatever I want because no one here has read the book, and you'll just assume it's true. I've actually given this book, so I work in product management, right? I have a product management team. I've given my team this book to read as homework. They hadn't had homework since high school. Kind of went down in several ways, but everybody's read the book. The interesting thing about it is it has these different levels of supplier, level 1 through to level 4, right? And then they draw these analogies with all these different industries. But you look at what we're doing right now. So level 1, basic supplier, box dropper, outsourcer. All I want is your money. I've got your money. I do not care. I don't care what value you're getting out of that product. I've got my money. I'm gone. I'm on to the next sucker. That's what they define as a level 1 supplier. And I think outsourcing contracts are a great example of that. Level 2 supplier, well, okay, I care a bit more now. Because in a year's time or 3 years' time, I've got a renewal I want. So suddenly, 6 months out from the renewal, we're all vendors are pretty much guilty of this. Suddenly, you're my best friend again. Haven't heard from me for a year and a half, 2 years. Suddenly, hey, remember me? Renewal's coming up. So I'm starting to care a little bit more about the value you're getting out of the product, right? Level 3, kind of where, so maybe we want to re-sign this. Level 3 is kind of where your managed security services are now. We actually do care. We see it as a bit of a partnership. We want the contract. We want the renewal. We're trying to give you some value. And we're trying to do as much as we can, but we have technology ceilings as well. The nirvana is the future state, level 4. So this is where you're basically doing outcome as a service. So what outcome do you want to buy? This is not about a managed email security. It's not about managed web security. It's not about MDR or whatever the latest fancy acronyms are we're pushing out at you. This is basically saying, my organization wants to be secure, and I want to partner with you. And if it's not secure, you've got as much to pay for here as I do. We have a common goal. We're working in this as a partnership. That's what outcome as a service is all about. Your relationship between your managed security service provider will change dramatically over what it is today. Okay? It's a really interesting book. It's about the only business book I've ever read in my life. Normally I'm reading Wilbur Smith and things like that. This one actually I enjoyed. Okay, let's drill into some of the global threat data. So this is global. So this has just been released. It's all on the trustwave.com website. So one small thing here, Asia Pacific, which is our master region, compromises increased 5%. Okay, kind of interesting. Email attacks. Spam went back up again. Oh, that was interesting. 2017 went down to 36%. 2018 up to 45%. Whoop-de-doo, which is probably what most people are thinking. I kind of agree. Spam is one of these things that hopefully is a tick box item now. Now, this is another great opportunity to extract myself from being an Australian because I am from New Zealand. For some reason, in Australia, the most common type of spam is basically phony dating websites and services. While your mind is boggling about what a dating service could be and how we've categorized that, and I must actually go and find out what the official categorization is. What is it with you people? 39% of all spam is dating related. 10% of spam was sextortion scam emails. Bit of a concern. The attackers aren't stupid. They will chase what is working. Okay? Now, interestingly, in New Zealand, job spam was actually the most popular. It's kind of weird. And in the US, no great prize for working out that pharmaceuticals were actually the most popular, especially the well-known one that starts with V. Nothing being said against the virality of the American race at all for anyone here. But for some reason, it's the most popular type of spam in the US. But here in Australia, it's all about dating spam. So clearly, you've sorted the V stuff out, and now you're into getting your value for money, maybe. Okay, let's move swiftly on before my marketing lady at the back keels over with concern. Percentage of spam that was malware that was in spam dropped from 26 down to 6%, which is pretty interesting. And then Microsoft Office documents were the most popular type of attachment when it came to malicious email. And there's the other types of file attachments that were in malicious spam, for those that want to read them. But this is the bit that concerns me. These are the most common seen vulnerabilities when we're looking at malicious spam. If we're all doing our jobs properly, how can a vulnerability from 2014 be the second most seen vulnerability that we're seeing through malicious spam? Because they don't continue using things that aren't working. They're not stupid. They continue using vulnerabilities and things like that are working, methods that are working. A vulnerability from 2014, second most popular vulnerability being seen in malicious spam. That's a concern. BEC, business email compromise, whether you want to call it spear phishing, CEO fraud, whatever you want to call it, we call it BEC. This has suddenly made email security interesting again, right? So for the last 7 or 8 years, you've been rusted on to whoever you were using. Spam's been going pretty well. Malicious spam was kind of behaving itself. I had fires I was fighting elsewhere. I just kept on renewing it because it wasn't really causing me problems, right? So then I migrated to Office 365 would be one of the reasons why you re-looked at your email security. Or you've been smashed by BEC emails. And then obviously if you've gone to Office 365, then actually you might be having this issue now. because it's actually one of the worst performing solutions when it comes to BEC. But the problem with BEC is it's a very low volume targeted attack against an organization. How well is a volumetric spam engine going to really perform against that? And that's what's been causing angst in a lot of organizations, big and small. Right? This is actually the most, issues from BEC, at least for people that will admit it, this is the biggest reason why we're gaining customers right now. Having a quality engine that is able to address this attack in particular is critically important. A lot more important than having flashy marketing videos on your website. So be careful the vendors you're using. Okay? BEC is very real. At least user education is critically important. From an Australian viewpoint, the latest type of BEC attack we've seen here is Payroll Scam. So this is where the email goes to the payroll administrator, addressed from the CEO, basically saying, hey, I've changed my bank. How do I go about changing my payroll details? And because it's from the CEO, the poor little payroll administrator, I shouldn't say that, the payroll administrator probably thinks, oh, let's do it easy for them. I won't send them the form or send them to some complicated website. You just give me your bank details, I'll do it for you. Which is exactly what they're looking for. Because it isn't the CEO's new bank account that the money's going into, it's the attacker's bank account that it's going into, and the first the CEO knows is when his wife's credit card starts bouncing all over town. It's not a great thing. We've seen this remarkably popular and very successful in the field. The other one globally that's actually doing the rounds right now, so Payroll Scam absolutely here in Australia is causing a bit of a issue right now. Globally, it's gift cards. It's the email from someone senior saying, hey, can you just pop down to Target and pick up a bunch of gift cards so I can use them for whatever reason and send them here. Pretty innocuous, simple sort of sounding request. It catches a lot of organizations out. BEC is a big issue with a lot of organizations. Some of the web stats they're actually seeing, it's all about cryptojacking and coin mining. And that's basically what we're seeing there. Massive issues globally around this. Certainly something to be aware of and make sure that your web security solutions are across this. What about at the board? So this is actually from the World Economic Forum 2018. Now, last time I checked, the World Economic Forum was not an IT security vendor. Right? This is sort of information that your board or your CFOs, etc., are actually reading. This is pretty interesting. Suddenly, cyber attacks, data theft, or fraud are in the top 10, numbers 3 and 4. No longer do we need to teach our board how to spell cyber. Now we need to be saying what we're doing about it. It's changed the discussion quite a bit. This, I think, is one of the biggest conundrums in the marketplace right now. How are you going to do all this stuff? And obviously the theme of this conference, right? How are you going to select which ones you're going to do? How are you going to cover the ones that you can't do? Do you want to be a specialist in certain areas, or do you want to be, a master of none? That's a big problem. Malware expert or data scientist? Data scientists are the most growing job category when it comes to cybersecurity positions right now. So if you're looking for a career change or looking for something to do or giving some advice, maybe to your children, data scientist. Pretty interesting. Far more than being able to reverse engineer malware. Professional education versus real hands-on experience. We're all going to have our different opinions there. You're never going to learn everything from scratch from being in the field, but then you're never going to learn everything that you're going to need to know at the coalface in a classroom. It's a difficult thing. Product expert versus scripting and orchestration expert. There's another interesting area. Dad, should I be a web developer or should I do scripting and orchestration? Scripting and orchestration, son? Absolutely. Orchestration and automation within those solutions is going to become critically important, as are the skills to be able to hook these things together. Make sense? Okay. So, if you're around here somewhere in our security maturity model, maybe relying on MSS, maybe or maybe not, using MSS for some of the commodity activity that you might be doing, how can you leapfrog yourself up the chain? You don't need to do every single one of these yourself. Partner Work out the best way to partner. Maybe MSS is not quite for you, but there's lots of options out in the marketplace. Because this is the interesting thing about MSS. We're kind of playing in two different areas of the security maturity model. So there's one of those lines that's squeaking. Apparently they also clean the laptop screen, which is quite useful. So innovative MSS or commodity MSS, or a mix of two. So if you want to leapfrog up that maturity level, definitely innovative MSS can help you do it. Because these are the sorts of offerings. There we go. Slow build. These sorts of offerings that are now coming out from the leading managed security service providers. Managed detection and threat response, MDR type technologies, proactive threat hunting, doing all this activity for you. You don't need to be the expert. But then you also, it's like an a la carte menu. So if you have a particular interest and a speciality in a certain area, fantastic. Knock yourself out. Supplement the areas where you do not have coverage by partnering. Don't go it alone. Make sense? All right. Bit of a taster. The other area that MSS is going is in accessibility. What happens if you're out at the shops or out at lunch? Major issues that happens. Maybe you need to update a whitelist. Maybe you need to log an incident. Maybe your managed security provider needs your authorization to react to some sort of high severity incident. Can you really wait until you get back into the office? This information needs to get to where you are. It needs to be available and usable by wherever you are, whenever that is. So mobile applications is certainly an area that I think is very interesting. So MSS is evolving in two areas. Innovative solutions like MDRE and MDRN and those sorts of technologies, helping you get into more of the detect and respond technologies. Remember when we started off with that in this graphic? And the other area is accessibility to what I need it to do. Accessibility for me to be able to use the tools and services that I'm getting as part of that service. Okay? All right. Fantastic timing, because that's me. Any questions? Explained everything really, really well, and now you've got everything you need. TrustWave obviously does have a booth out here, by the way, so we're giving away these really cool little magnet sticker things that you can use to do different wording, as well as a lot of great data sheets out there as well. And, of course, lovely people to talk to. So please come along and see us. Also, these really cool Hyvent stickers too. Actually, I forgot about those. Okay, thanks.